Hi guys, James at RampantLionReviews again for you today with another beer review. For this one we are going to return to Sweden once again, and this is a brewery who I actually really quite enjoy reviewing, and the brewer there, Jessica, is very nice. So we're going to return to Arlandastad to the north of Stockholm once again, and we're revisiting St Eriks Bryggeri. And Jessica, who is the brewer there, actually produces some very nice German beers, and this is the first Belgian one that I've actually seen come out of this brewery, so I'm very interested to see what her take on this is. And of course it's actually one of the heavier beers I've seen her produce as well. It comes in at 8%. A lot of the other ones have been sort of 5 and 6% I think, so this one it should be very interesting, particularly as well because it's a Belgian stout, and you really don't hear very much about that style of beer anymore. When it comes to Belgian beer, it's always triples, quadruples, doubles, wit beers, blondes, things like that. You very rarely hear about a Belgian stout. The only ones I can think of that I've ever reviewed for you on the channel was actually the Chopper Stout, which was from 6 Degrees North in Scotland, a Belgian style brewery, and also the Black from Arlandastad Brewing over in America, in Maine actually. So this is the first Belgian style stout I've reviewed in quite a wee while, so should be a very interesting review. And Jessica produces some awesome beer, so I'm sure it will be a pretty good one, so do go and check out St Eriks Bryggeri. But anyway, as is usual with my beer reviews then, I'll tell you a little bit about the brewery. If you do want to get straight to the tasting, just fast forward. All the usual websites are in the video description below. That's the brewery website, the link to my other St Eriks reviews I've done before. There will be more added in the near future, and there's all my usual social media things, Facebook, Twitter and Untappd. Please follow me on there. If you want to see more beer reviews, do subscribe to the channel, and I will apologise in advance for any bad Swedish pronunciations in this video. I'm still getting used to Swedish since I moved here to Lund, and obviously pronunciation is one of the more difficult aspects when it comes to Swedish. But anyway, to tell you about St Eriks Bryggeri, so the company is owned by the Swedish beer importer Galatea, and the head brewer, as I've mentioned, is Jessica Heidrich. So the brewery is named after an old Stockholm brewery of the same name, which was founded back in 1859, and they stayed in production until the 1960s when they fell victim to monopolisation. The old brewery was actually located in Kungsholmstorg, and it was widely regarded as the kind of grandest brewery of Stockholm. But in 2001, Galatea acquired the rights to the St Eriks brand and spent 9 years building the ground to actually relaunch it. They soon crossed paths with microbiologist and brewer Jessica Heidrich, who became the head brewer after a few meetings. But the St Eriks Bryggeri operates as an independent unit within the Galatea company, and in 2011 they actually decided to invest in the capacity at Sigtuna Brygghus in Arlandastad, which is where the majority of the St Eriks beers are produced. And Jessica says that she has the motto of hops and love when it comes to brewing beers, and she likes to combine American and English brewing styles with Swedish beer tradition. But as I mentioned at the start of the video, my opinion is that Jessica produces some really awesome German beers. The October Helles beer that I produced, I would say, I'd be tempted to say that's the best one I've tried from her so far. But that said, the Rauch beer was really quite interesting too. But overall, she is a very good brewer and produces some really quite interesting stuff. So like I say, this is the first Belgian style beer I've tried, or that I'm going to try, that she's produced. So I'm very interested to see what her take on this one is. But the brewery do have a regular range. There's the Pilsner, the IPA, the Pale Ale, the APA, the Centennial, the Rauch beer, which you will have seen as my last review, and also the Organic Ale as well. So there's quite a few beers come out of this brewery. They do limited editions as well like this, probably I think maybe every 2 months or something like that they actually produce these beers, but they are definitely worth checking out, particularly if it's a German style of beer. I think that's where Jessica really shines. So do go and check out the brewery website and you can get an idea of those below. I have to admit, I'm very much looking forward to October this year when I can try the October Helles again, because she probably will vary it up actually. But we'll see how we get on with this one. As I mentioned to you, this one is a stout beer. It comes in at 8% and it was released as a limited edition in January 2016. So I'll just let you have a little look at the artwork on this one before we open it up. Bring the camera up there. As you can see, it's got the typical St Eriks Bryggeri artwork on it. You can see on the glass there is actually a nice kind of queen or something. I'm not sure how well you can see that with the light there. You can see it better there. There's the nice queen there, and you can see it there is the St Eriks bottle cap on this one. But all of the beers come in this kind of almost conical bottle flask, I guess you could describe it as, but they're all presented with this kind of label artwork that you see here. They're quite interesting beers as well. Like I say, I think Jessica shines when it comes to German style beers, but I need to try a couple more of her regular brews actually, because it seems to have only been the limited edition ones I've reviewed for you so far. But as you can see, there's a nice smoky opening on this beer, and we'll get it out and into the glass. It's a really smoky one. There's a lot of carbonation on this, so I just need to be careful with the pour actually. It's always a thing where you have to watch with Belgian beers. They tend to be very crazy when it comes to the carbonation. I'll maybe just leave it at that just now and let it settle a little bit, and I can put the rest in a wee bit later on. But as you can see, as you would expect when it's a stout beer, of course, it's poured a nice dark rosewood ebony colour. There's, even with probably about 2/3 of the bottle in there, there is about a kind of 2/3 finger of a frothy kind of beigey tan head on this. There's no transparency to this, as you would expect, and that's probably just because of how dark it is. If I shine it up to the light, there is a very light trace of a kind of ruby edge to this one, but it's a nice dark ebony rosewood colour, and there's a bit of carbonation just sticking to the side of the glass. One or two little bits of sedimentation there, just a tiny little bit. I haven't had this one in the fridge too long, maybe just about 3 or 4 hours actually, but there's a few little bubbles just going up towards the bottom of that head there. So let's give it a smell actually, and then we can pour the rest of it. Now that's quite interesting on the nose actually. On first glance, it's actually got quite a bit of that Belgian bready yeast character coming out of it actually. You can smell a little bit of the kind of banana and things, which is quite interesting. That's a really unusual aroma for a stout, but then again, as I said, I've not tried too many Belgian stouts. There's a definite roasted character coming out of this nose, but there's not. Really, it does lean more towards these bready characters. It's like a kind of dark, almost well-fired bread crust that you're getting from this one. It's really interesting, but on top of that, you've got these kind of these typical Belgian bready yeast characters coming out of it. A little bit of banana in there, you know, the clove kind of spice. That's really interesting actually. It actually maybe even has the nose of like a wit beer or a Hefeweizen or something. That's what's really unusual about this beer when you consider it's meant to be a stout, but it really has these banana and almost yeasty notes to it. I'll try pouring the rest in and just see. Maybe I'm just a bit too far away from it actually. I'll just put the rest in and just check that that's right, because it is actually quite unusual. There's a bit of yeast just came out of it there, and you can see a little bit of it on the side of the bottle as I put it back, but that's a very unusual aroma on this beer. Nearly snorting a little bit of it up there. Yeah. Just take a little bit of time with this beer. If you get the chance to try it, it is a limited edition, so spend a little bit of time smelling it. You know, there is a bit of chocolatey malt to it, there's a little bit of roasted caramel, some of the well-fired bready and slightly coffee-ish malts out there. But I think it really does have an underlying note of these kind of typical Belgian bready yeasty, almost banana and clovey characteristics to this beer. I think there's definitely some of that going on in here. So as I say, just take a little bit of time before you actually try this beer and try and smell the aroma. That's really quite unusual. I'm just trying to think whether I've actually missed anything from this. There's a bit of a licorice note in there as well actually, a bit of coffee and licorice, that well-fired bready crust. But overall, it's really quite an interesting beer. So let's get stuck into this one. My first take on one of Jessica's Belgian style beers. So this is the Belgian Stout, a limited edition from January 2016 from St Eriks Bryggeri, based in Arlandastad in Sweden, just to the north of Stockholm. Skål! Now I'll tell you something, it is a pretty good beer actually, but it's quite different from anything I've tried from her before. The carbonation in this one for me is quite active, and it does have that typical Belgian carbonation to it. You can get some of these beers that can be very active in the mouth, and that's definitely in this one as well, but maybe it'll settle down a little bit. So as I always say, sugar the beer around your palate a little bit and let the whole mouth adjust to this one. But you will see that when you actually do that, the carbonation goes a bit crazy in this one. This one is quite a heavily carbonated beer. Yeah, this is quite interesting this. There's a definite, you know, you have that definite bready, yeasty character that you expect of a Belgian ale in there. It just sits on the middle of the tongue. But on top of it, you get this really kind of interesting chocolate and yeasty and chocolate and licoricey character. It's really the licorice that's sticking in this beer for me. That's the thing that's most unusual about this one. Yeah, that's really unusual. This one really leans. You know, if you taste tested this blind, you would think it's one of these American beers that has you would think it's a licorice stout actually, just on a blind taste test. It's really quite interesting in that regard. The thing that really gives it away is the Belgian beer though, is that kind of bready and yeasty underpinning that the beer has, and of course the carbonation too. So I mean, Jessica's made a beer here that is very it's very interesting. I mean, she does a lot of beers that are very interesting. Well, this one's a bit more quirky in comparison to the other ones I've reviewed for, like the Oktoberfest Helles that I reviewed. That really kind of struck the right note for me. The peach IPA, that was a very quirky beer as well, but this one is even more so, I would say. I mean, the Rauch beer that she did as well was quite interesting because it was halfway between a German one and halfway between some of this kind of Scottish peaty Rauch beers I tried, but this one is probably the quirkiest beer I've come across from her yet. It's really interesting. Yeah. So like I say, in the middle of the palate, you have this bready, yeasty character. There's almost like a German rye bread character to this one actually. There is that kind of underlying kind of brown bready, kind of cereally flavour to this one. You have a bit of a biscuity malt in there too, but there's a lot of chocolate in here. It's quite a dark chocolate, I would say though, and you have that well-fired roasted bread crust just sitting on top of there. But really, there is a big licoricey flavour to this one, and you will feel that. Even into the aftertaste, it sits there. You do get an element of dryness from this beer, right enough, but in the middle of the palate it starts to become dry, but in the middle of the tongue you can just feel this almost wet, kind of syrupy licorice flavour sticking out of this one. That is the real kind of quirky thing in this beer. As I said, I've not tried too many Belgian stouts, but the licorice aspect of this one is what really makes it stand out for me. There's a little bit of a red fruity ester in this one, probably a kind of figgy or candied fruit flavour. If you just go behind that very front curve of the tongue, you'll feel this little oily bubble, and there's a kind of slightly figgy or candied fruit flavour from this one. But I guess what's unusual about this beer is that it's the licoricey flavours that are covering the booze. At 8%, it does have that typical Belgian booziness, but it's the licorice flavours that are covering that rather than the kind of caramel flavours or roasted caramel flavours that you would typically get in a double or a triple, for example. But yeah, there's a good boozy character to this one, I would say. In the back corners of the palate, I think there's a little bit of an earthy hop there, but overall the hoppy character of the beer is very smooth. It maybe becomes just a little bit more grassy as you come forward and go round the front curve of the tongue there. There's not too much dryness to it. If anything, it's more of a grassy dryness at the front of the tongue there, with just a little bit of an earthy character at the back corners of the palate. But it's a very interesting beer, this one. It's really hard to compare it to anything, to be honest. As I said, if you tried this beer blind, you would think it's a licorice stout. You would think it's one of these American beers, kind of one of these licorice stouts, as I say. But the thing that really gives it away as a Belgian style beer is that bready, yeasty underpinning that's in the flavour and the sort of carbonation that it has. Those are the two kind of key things. But in terms of the beers I've tried from St Eriks before, this is by far the most quirky one I've done. So it's quite interesting. It's one, I think, pardon me, it's a beer that you need to try and go into it with an open mind. It's very unusual in that sense, just because of the licorice is there. But that said, it may be that I have a bit of a lack of exposure to the Belgian stout style, like I said. So I would be interested to try more of these and see what they are. But as always, it's another good beer from St Eriks. It's just very quirky. There's not much more you can say about it than that. It's actually, I did the same with the Peach IPL review. It's a very unusual one, and I think that's what Jessica likes to do with beer. She likes to produce beer that makes people really think about what exactly is going on. But for me, the licorice is the really quirky element to this one. There's a caramel element in there as well, actually. It's a little bit of a toasted caramel, I think. But that, as I say, that licorice thing is the one that is really just staying prominent in this flavour. So in terms of the mouthfeel, this one, I would say mid-bodied. The yeasty and bready characteristics just give it that little bit extra. The carbonation is quite active in this one. If you swirl it around your mouth, like I always recommend, just to let the whole palate adjust, you will feel the carbonation just bubble up in this one. There's a bit of an oily mouthfeel to this. That helps bring out the more licoricey flavours in this one, but there's a good roasty bitterness there. That kind of stays into the aftertaste, I would say, and you can feel that around the edge of the tongue, but there's a little bit of wet character in the middle of the tongue. These kind of licoricey flavours, a bit of the chocolate in there as well, maybe some of the caramel too, and a little bit of the fruity character, but overall the hops are very smooth too. But there's a good balance here between the roasted character and the sweetness. As I always like to do with these videos, I try and think of other beers that you could compare this to, but in honesty, this is a very unique one, and I've never tasted anything that is quite like that. I've never reviewed a licorice stout on the channel. I've tried one or two of them when I've been in bars and things like that, and when friends have had them, of course, but I've never actually reviewed one for you on the channel. But the thing I would say about this one, if you like licorice stouts, you will enjoy this beer. I'm really not sure how widely distributed it is, but as I've said in the video a couple of times, this is definitely one of the more quirky beers you're going to find from St Eriks. It's very enjoyable. For me, as I always say with stout beers and porter beers and things, this is a beer that you taste for the sake of tasting it, if you like. It's good to pair with ice cream and things like that. I'm not much into that, mind you, but this is a dessert beer, most definitely, and you will enjoy this beer if you enjoy licorice stouts. But if you want something a little bit different and you want your palate to be tested, you will also enjoy this one. So yeah, another really quite interesting beer from St Eriks. As I said, I think St Eriks, I think Jessica might struggle to make me think, to give me a better beer than the Oktoberfest Helles that she produced. I mean, all of her beers are good, but for me, she just hit the right spot with that Oktoberfest Helles, but she's produced another really quirky beer that is really quite good. So I recommend this to those of you who like licorice stouts. But as always, please let me know in the comment section below your own thoughts on this beer. Always interesting to hear from you guys that are watching the videos, and please let me know where you're drinking this beer as well. It'll be interesting to see how far and wide these beers are actually reaching. But until the next time, please like, subscribe, share, all the usual YouTube stuff. I hope you've enjoyed this beer review. Please check out my social media things too, but the most important thing, go and check out St Eriks Bryggeri from Arlandastad in Sweden. Jessica produces some very nice beers. My first review of a Belgian beer that she's produced, actually, but I think she shines particularly when it comes to German beers, so do go and check those out. I thank you once again for watching my beer reviews. Please subscribe to the channel below, and I will catch you soon. We will be returning to St Eriks Bryggeri in the very near future, I'm sure. Cheers just now, and I'll catch you later.